So again, right now, I'm going to get us started. Again, my name is Bill Arnold, Senior Director of Alumni and Family Engagement at the college. So glad that you're here joining us for this edition of our Tartan Talk webinar series, landing your first or maybe your next job and preparing from the ground up, which is critical. This is a serious task and something that there's a lot of details to it. And so if you're new to this, your first time applying for a job, there's a lot to learn. If you haven't applied to a job in a while, there's maybe some things you need to think about. So our panelists today, we've got three of our alumna who are experts kind of in this field, in the area of human resources and talent management. And so I'm pleased that Samantha Kuykendall, class of 15, who's human resources manager at Lipper Components, is joining us and is going to be talking a bit about the search process and how do you go about that. Allie Huntoon, class of 11, is a human resources account manager with Allied HR Solution, and Allie's going to be sharing some thoughts about how do you prepare your resume? How do you get your materials together so that you're best presenting yourself and getting your foot in the door? And then Lisa Ann Mithen, class of 84, Senior Director of Global Talent Management at NSF International, is going to talk about, okay, once you're in the door, once you've prepared that resume, got that in, they're interviewing you, how do you nail that interview? And so Lisa's got some great insights on that. And so I'm going to turn it over to them, and they're going to just walk their way through this, and just wanted to say thanks to each of them for being with us this afternoon. And I'm going to step to the back here and let them take it away.
Great, thank you so much. So like Bill said, I am Allie Huntoon, class of 11, go Scots, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about resume building. So the first thing that's really important when you're going to apply for a job, maybe it's a posting you're seeing on Indeed, is to really read the job description and to look for those keywords that the recruiter is looking for. It's really important to tailor each time you apply for a job, to tailor your cover letter and resume to that job, and incorporating any keywords that you can to try to make yourself stand out. You definitely should not use the same resume for each job that you are applying for. You want to include any experience that may be relevant for the industry that you are applying for. So really take the time to think about your experiences, even if they're not work related. They might be something out in the community, something that you've helped a local organization with. As long as it is relevant to that industry, go ahead, put it on your resume and make yourself stand out. And kind of going along with those same lines too, is you should always consider the company's culture. So for example, a previous company that I had the opportunity of working for really valued volunteer experience. We even took a whole day off, a whole paid day off, to go out in our communities to volunteer to our times and talents. So when I knew that that was an important part of that company's culture, I wanted to definitely play up any volunteer experience that I had from, previous lives, previous endeavors on my resume and cover letter, so they know that that's also important to me and I'm going to fit in great with your company culture. The last point on your cover letter and job description is don't be afraid to make it more than one page. I think that's a myth that we've all learned growing up when we started first making our resumes and cover letters, stick to one page. So I remember doing that, in high school and college, making my font size, 6.5 to get all of my experience in one page. Don't worry about doing that. Recruiters are definitely used to seeing more than one page resumes, and it's a lot easier if it's easy to read and your experience really stands out no matter how many pages it might require. So the next tip seems like a no-brainer, but it's really important. And even if you already think that your resume and cover letter are easy to read and error-free, It only takes a few moments to partner with someone from your career service team, or a colleague or mentor that you trust, to have them just give it a once over. Just to make sure that everything makes sense to someone who's not you and someone who's not in your brain. So, take the time, have someone that you trust, run over it, even if it's just for a few minutes, to see, does this make sense? Are there any errors? Did I miss anything? Another great tip to standing out is to submit a cover letter. So, the recruitment process has really moved online. The majority of people are finding their candidates through Indeed or LinkedIn, and the process is usually just submit a resume, maybe a few qualifications, check a couple boxes, and usually it's not required to submit a cover letter, but I would definitely suggest doing so. It really helps you to stand out amongst the candidates who don't take the time to put together a customized cover letter for that company or that position. And it's a great way too to incorporate things that you can't fit on your resume, or maybe don't apply 100%, but you think will still make you stand out. It's a great way to do that in the cover letter. So really sit down, take your time, and go through that, and really try to sell yourself to that recruiter or whoever that cover letter is reaching. Another great tip is to make your content visually appealing. So the layout, font size, and overall formatting is definitely important. Recruiters and talent management team members can definitely tell who has put the time and effort into their resumes and cover letters and who hasn't. And really make everything cohesive too. So if you are submitting multiple documents, maybe you have a cover letter, a resume, a reference sheet, who know, other things, publications that you may have written, make sure that they're all cohesive. They all have the same font. They have the same color scheme. It's really impressive to a recruiter when they get a package of perfectly tailored items that are error-free. And you might also want to consider your industry as well. So if you're a graphic designer applying for a job in social media, you may want to make your resume and cover letter, stand out by adding some graphics, maybe a photo of yourself, maybe even some pictures of your work, things that you've created before. And that might not be as important if you are applying for a financial advisor position at a financial institution. So think about the role that you're applying for and kind of how you can tailor how your resume feels and looks to that position. Another thing too that I'd like to point out is there's so many free templates for resume building available. Canva is a great resource, and I'm actually going to talk a little bit more about Canva on the next slide as well. But Google that, look into that, find some templates that really speak to you. Work smarter, not harder. A lot of these templates are already created, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Pop your information in, make it look professional, and you're good to go. And then lastly, I think, and Sam's going to talk a little bit about LinkedIn later in this presentation as well. But LinkedIn is a great research tool, or a great tool to use, because a lot of recruiters are going to use that to research you and your profile. And it's a great way to include a lot more information than you can fit in your resume and cover letter. You can even recommend, ask for recommendations from different colleagues. So you can actually have, actual little recommendations of you and your work, so that recruiters and headhunters can read those. And another thing I want to talk about is your headshot. So make sure that you have a professional headshot. And here's that Canva knowledge I promised you was coming. So Canva is it's a free platform to help you design anything on social media or flyers, and something that they actually have available. It's through the paid version, but there's also a 30-day trial if you'd like to try this for free. There's something called background remover. So if you don't have access to, book a photographer for a professional headshot, no worries. It's 2020. We have so many ways to do this on our own. Take a great head and shoulders picture of you with some good lighting on portrait mode on your phone. And look professional, look approachable, don't hide your personality, be you. And then on Canva, what you can do is upload that photo with the great lighting and remove anything from the background that might be there. And then you can pop in a shade of color, maybe a nice gray background, maybe a nice blue background. Super easy way to get a professional headshot for free without having to hire anyone. So look into those options as well. It's easy to make a professional profile and headshot without using a lot of resources and spending time and money. So that wraps it up for me on the resume building section. I'm going to turn it over to Sam now. If I can get my slide to work here. For searching and applying. So take it away, Sam.
All right, so hi everybody. My name is Samantha Coy-Kendall, class of 2015. Really excited to talk to you guys today. So what I'm really going to focus on is how to search and apply for the jobs out there. So you've got your resume, you've got your cover letter, you've gone through everything that Allie just walked you through. Now you actually have to find a job out there. So that can be really daunting. And one of the most important things is to leverage your network. We all know so many people, whether it's a personal connection or a professional connection, or even somebody that maybe was a professor or something like that, that can help you connect to open jobs. A lot of times, somebody out there knows of an opening and they really can help you connect to that. So I think the most important thing is letting people know, hey, I'm actively looking for a job, and it really can open a lot of doors. And even if maybe that person that you know doesn't work in the industry that you're looking for, chances are they do know somebody who works in that industry. So really, networking is key. I know sometimes networking can seem overwhelming, but now we have so many great social media platforms that we can do it through, especially now that a lot of us are maybe not out and about as much due to COVID, but we really can leverage that, which I'll talk about a little bit more. When you're using those network sites, the biggest tip that I can give is make sure that your contact information is up to date. The worst is, as a recruiter or HR professional trying to reach out to somebody in the applicant process, and you find out that maybe they don't have a good phone number or their email address is incorrect. Not too long ago, we were actually hiring for an engineering position and had a ton of applications come in and trying to go through those. And we were actually ready to bring somebody in for an interview, and had initially spoken to them over the phone and then wanted to send out some follow-up email information on the interview. They called me a couple days later and said, hey, I never received that email. I said, hey, I sent it out. Let me confirm your email address, and it ended up being a different email address. So we kind of went through the whole process, and then we were to the point where we were ready to extend an offer to that candidate. Again, I was like, I remember them telling me that they had a different email, but everything on my system says I sent to the correct one. So I actually called them again and asked, said, can you please just one more time give me your email? They gave it to me, and turns out they had actually typed it wrong both on their resume and in the online application that they filled out. So double checking your work, making sure your contact information is so important, because if other recruiters or anything like that only reach out via email, you're likely never to hear anything for a position. So can't stress that enough, and I'm sure that you'll hear that multiple times. All right. So again, just kind of building on using networking sites. So make sure your profile is updated and highlights your past experience, learning, and skills. So if you're a recent grad and maybe you don't have your first professional experience yet, don't worry. There's so many great things that you've done in school, whether it's a class project or you have been a part of an organization or sports, that you can highlight. A lot of times that's applicable to the jobs that you're applying for. So don't be afraid to put that in there, and don't rule yourself out from jobs, even if you feel that, hey, you know what, I don't quite meet those skills or anything like that. If you're already in a profession, definitely take what you've been doing at your past jobs and apply it. But when you're kind of applying and talking to your recruiter, make sure that you really highlight those, because that's going to give them a good detailed view of kind of what your background is, which Lisa is going to talk about a little bit more in her section. And then make sure that you have somebody review your profile, which is kind of a little bit what Allie was saying, but from multiple different views. So if you've ever gone on LinkedIn and from the computer, it definitely looks different than what the mobile platform looks like. It condenses the information. You don't see all the details that maybe you can see from a computer-based version. So make sure that you're happy with what you see in either version. All right, so when you're applying, don't be afraid to open your net of what you're applying to. So you might not meet all the requirements, but that doesn't mean that you're not a great candidate for the position. If the position interests you, I would say go for it. Really, that's the only way to know if maybe you are a good fit for it. So I would say that a lot of times on job applications, it is very cut and dry what we're looking for. And we're not going to be able to check a box on every single thing for what that candidate looks like. So I would say open your net out there. Maybe your background is in business and you really want to work in a business setting. Think about all the industries that have a office setting or an office component. It might not be, say, the financial industry, but maybe you can do a position similar in manufacturing or food service or fashion, something like that. A lot of jobs are transferable throughout multiple industries. So just kind of open your net up. Don't be afraid to see what you see out there. Again, I mentioned on here requirements can be flexible. Like I said, it's a little bit difficult as a recruiter to find that exact one candidate who checks every single box on the resume or excuse me, on the job description. So like I said, if you're interested in it, put your application in there. And then commit yourself. So really, if you are job searching, you should treat this as your full-time job. So really what I mean by that is structure your day. So wake up in the morning at a consistent time, get yourself ready, feel good about yourself, eat a breakfast, kind of get yourself into a routine, because eventually, if everything goes well in your job search process, you're going to have a structured day typically. So maybe in the mornings, what you do is you check your existing job openings that you have applied to, see if there's anything additional you need. Then you could move on to searching for new positions. Maybe you've set up sort of alerts on job boards or things like that. Or check in with your connections that you have on LinkedIn or other similar profiles, but really structure your day, spend the time doing it. If you're not spending the time doing it, you're probably not going to see the results that you're looking for. Kind of going on from there, most job postings have a quick expiration period. As a recruiter, when we post them up there for certain positions, we put a deadline. We're trying to fill a position. We don't want to leave this just open-ended for forever. So you're going to see a date that this closes. Sometimes those go quick, sometimes it's a day, couple days, a week. So really make sure that you're paying attention to when that job expires, because once it closes, you're likely not to get your information in there. Also, for certain positions and industries, their application process is very extensive. So it might not just be upload your resume, submit a cover letter, boom, you're done. You may have to take some tests. You may have to put your references in there. You may have to do a pre-submittal to a background screening, and those can take time. So if you're not really putting in the time and planning for that, you're waiting till, hey, this job posting closes in a day. It's probably going to be really stressful, and you're not going to be putting forward your best work. So just really give yourself enough time for that. And really, if you're not actively applying, make sure your resume, cover letters are updated, and then reach out to recruiters. I think that's a good way to stay in the front of somebody's mind. Is we get a ton of resumes in all the time, and somebody that's going to stick out to me is somebody who reaches out and says, hey, I'm checking in on my application. I'm like, okay, great. Not only am I going into the system, I'm going to pull it up. They're going to kind of be at the top of my pile. So that gives you a leg up. So really looking and making that connection out to them. So last thing I have here is just talking a little bit more about how networking pays off. So if you're looking at this graph here, it shows a couple different ways of how hires came into a company. And if you're looking on your far left, it talks about employee referrals. So I mentioned that in the beginning. Employee referrals, when I see those come across my desk, that's kind of already like a stamp of approval, because typically a current employee is not going to put their name out there for a referral unless they feel like that person could be a good fit. Because really, not only are you sticking your neck out for that person, but you're also kind of putting your reputation a little bit on the line. So we typically don't refer somebody for a position that, hey, you know, this person never shows up for work. Their work ethic is pretty low. So employee referrals are definitely a good thing. So back to this graph here, you can see that employee referrals are usually the smallest amount of applicants that you get, but they have the highest percentage of interviews and the highest percentage of being hired on to a company. So that's pretty amazing. So it really just shows you that networking pays off. Even if it's not a direct connection, knowing somebody who knows somebody, that's going to help get your foot in the door. And it's really, a lot of times it's who you know that will really kind of get your face out in front of that recruiter and that hire. So I'm going to turn it on over to Lisa at this point.
Thank you, Samantha. So we're going to talk about how to succeed in the interview. And the first piece I want to talk about is, what are hiring leaders actually looking for from the interview process? They want to first and foremost match the candidate qualifications to the skills and knowledge needed to succeed in the job. So Samantha, I believe, talked about this, having those transferable skills, the things that you've done, whether it's in a job or in school or in some activity, you've demonstrated skills in that. So make sure that you're including that in terms of describing your qualifications. They also want to gather the data they need to make a well-informed, data-based hiring decision. And we'll talk about how they do that, what they use as their data points that they're gathering. They finally want to find a candidate who's a good fit with the job and the organization. As I'm saying, this is what they are looking for. You too should be gathering information about the role and the organization and all of that. So we're going to talk toward the end about those pieces. But this is a dialogue. When you're in an interview, it should never feel like an interrogation. It should feel like a dialogue. And you can help make it that. It'll help you and it'll help the interviewer if you establish that kind of rapport right from the beginning. So I'm going to go through some crazy and different questions for a minute, because sometimes these show up in interviews. So a question like this, crazy question: how many streetlights are there in New York City? Does that really get at the skills that you have and the qualifications? Does that show, I don't know, analysis? Not really. It's just a brain teaser and doesn't give them any data. So you can answer it, you can laugh it off, don't be too concerned about it. They might say, how would you manage a project if the deadline were close and your manager changed criteria? This is actually a hypothetical question. So I'm going to give you some techniques you can use to turn that into a behavioral question. And I'll describe what that is in just a minute. But If they don't ask the kind of question you're hoping they'll ask, what I'd like you to walk away with today is how do you convert it with your answer to what they really need? And then finally, what holidays do you celebrate? There are a lot of questions that seep into interviews that actually aren't legal. Anything that gets at any of those protected class criteria shouldn't really appear in an interview. So be diplomatic, be kind, be respectful, but you don't ever have to reveal that information in an interview. A better way that it should be asked is to say, we recognize the standard 6 or 7. It's been a while since I've set up a calendar for those, but we recognize the standard ones and give time off for that. You're obviously welcome to use your planned time off, your PTO, for any additional time off you'd like to take. Boom. They shouldn't be asking you your personal information. Okay, so what is a behavioral question? A behavioral question is based on the premise that past behavior is a good predictor of future behavior. What you did in the past demonstrates some skill or ability. So finding out all those little data points is what most interviewers are doing. Behavioral selection is the industry standard, and the technique that I'm going to show you is the industry standard in collecting those behavioral examples, those data points. Most businesses do this in one way or another. Most candidates don't know about this, so I call it the secret ingredient for candidates. Behavioral questions should sound something like these. Tell me about a time when you had several tasks to complete at once. What did you do? Very specific to you in a specific example and what your actions were. Or walk me through an event in your past when you were not able to meet a customer's need. Sometimes interviewers will ask a negative because how you handle it and how you come out of it also demonstrates skills. Here's the secret ingredient. If you use the STAR model as the framework for your answers, you will always be giving them a behavioral response, a behavioral example, and that's what they need. That's what they need to make a decision. No matter how they ask the question, it might not come out as pretty as these, but you can convert it to this. So what is a STAR? A STAR is the acronym for ST, meaning what was the context? What were you trying to accomplish? What was the project or the activity you were involved in? What actions did you take or what did you say personally? What did you say or do? And then what's the result? What was the effect of that action or those things that you said or did? So let's take a look at a complete STAR. The first sentence is the situation for the candidate. It's about a complex project that fell behind schedule and everybody started blaming everyone else. So what actions did this candidate take? Very specific. Called a meeting, focused on facts, persuaded the team to move forward in a different way and address the issues that were holding up the project. And the outcome or the result? Focusing on those issues enabled them to come up with a plan that rescued the project, etc. And here's the clincher, we completed it on time. Every interviewer likes to know in some measurable or quantifiable way what the degree of success was. So a situation or task, an action, and a result. Cling to that as your framework for your answers and access all of your past experiences. Because remember, we talked about those, couple of us have talked about those transferable skills. Sometimes the interviewers will ask questions that are not behavioral. Tell me about a time when, but they'll say, generally when this is going on, we often do this. And can you tell me about a time like that? And it's very vague. Convert it. No matter how they ask the question, structure your response. Well, actually, there was one particular time, now I'm really being specific, when I had to do project XYZ, these were the steps I took, and this is how it turned out. Even though they didn't ask you the behavioral question, you're delivering the behavioral example that they really need. You're delivering the data point to them. Another kind of false star is an opinion, and they'll ask it in ways that use words like, what do you think? How do you believe this would go? They'll use those superlatives. What's the fastest or the highest or the best? That's not really an objective question. It's an opinionated one. Don't fall into the trap of saying, well, I think that the best way, say, well, actually this one time, this is what was going on. This is what I did. And here's how it turned out. Keep going back to that. I promise you, it is the secret ingredient to providing what those interviewers need. The last one is an easy one to recognize. It's a hypothetical, false star, and you will recognize it by the word would. If you find an interviewer going into the woods, or if you hear yourself speaking in the woods, well, when I get something like that, I would, the minute you do that, finish your sentence, stay calm, and say, actually, I have an example of that, and give them a past example. Convert anything that's future-oriented, theoretical, hypothetical, convert it to a behavioral example. Use that STAR framework. So the last bit I want to talk about is not so much skills and abilities, but rather aspects of fit. The interviewer is also looking to see if you fit the job, if you fit the organization, and how do we ascertain what that means? And by the way, you should be looking at those things too, because the worst thing you can do is take a job that is not a fit in an organization that is not a fit. That's where we end up with lots of turnover. We say, I'm going to make this work, and 3 to 6 months later, we're gone. It's hard on the organization. It's especially hard on you. So be aware that they're assessing your fit. You need to be assessing the fit of the organization and job for you. So what is fit? All of the things that you really like to do. Oh, I'm really detail oriented, but I also like to be creative, and I do like to travel a little bit. So those are some aspects I would look for in a job. Well, are those aspects available in that job? Are there lots of opportunities for that? Or is it a very defined by process job that doesn't do the detail piece and there's absolutely no travel? Then that would say that you're probably in that lower left quadrant. But if the job is very detail oriented, but allows creativity and innovation, and in fact encourages it, and has some travel involved, then you're probably in the upper right quadrant. So the things that you really like that are very much, they have lots of opportunities for in the job are a fit. The things you don't really care for, that they don't have lots of opportunities for, that's also a fit. If you don't really care for them and there are lots of opportunities, that's not a fit. Okay, so look for those things to match, and look for the aspects of yourself, your own aspects that you think by the job description match that job, or ask them a question about the culture of the organization. And if there are a couple of things they say, words they use that match with what you really kind of groove on, they really motivate you, then speak to that. Oh, you said that it's very much an open door, innovation focused culture. Gosh, those really resonate with me, and here's why. Here's where I've been successful, or here's what I've done. Go into another STAR if you can. So the areas of motivational fit that employers look for are job fit, the aspects of the job, organization fit, the values, the culture, the operating structure, and then location fit. You know, someone who's not a fan of cold weather is probably going to look in warmer climates. That's an obvious one. So be aware of where the jobs are. Okay, the location is also important. So the takeaways for today are you need to give them what they want in the interview. Make it easy for them. Make sure you prepare before the interview with examples from your past work experience, or maybe it's from school experience, or maybe it's from outside activity experience. Anything that you can structure into a relevant example of you demonstrating a particular skill that you think would be a qualification for this job, or you know from the job posting is, that's what you want to dig for. Come up with those examples, craft your stars. I actually tell people, type them up, review them, so that you have, I use the example of a quiver of arrows. You need to be able to pull an arrow out when they ask a question, pull another arrow out and hit the bullseye with each one of your arrows. No matter how that question is phrased, use the STAR framework. recognize the false stars and convert them to stars. Know the aspects of the job that make you a good fit with both the job and the organization, and highlight those about yourself. Highlight where you fit and how well you fit. Use those behavioral examples again, use stars. The bottom line is you need to dazzle them with stars throughout the interview. Thanks, everybody.
Great. Thank you. What great, great content. And so thank you, Allie and Samantha and Lisa Ann. Obviously, we're at our Q&A time. So welcome anyone to, if you want to pose a question in the chat, or if you'd like, we're at a point where you could unmute yourself and your microphone and simply ask the question. There were a couple of comments in the chat when Allie and Samantha were talking about applying for positions that, you know, even if you don't meet all the qualifications. I think Samantha was mentioning that that reinforced, and there was an example that rarely did people in the organization meet it, maybe 50 to 70% of the things that were listed on the job description, but they were great candidates and they were great employees. And Allie reinforced that there's some data out there that reflects that women often won't apply unless they see themselves fitting 100% of them, where men often will, if they hit just 60% of them, will apply. So there's some gender issue potentially happening here too. But any questions that people have, clarifications, points of interest? Somebody asked, what do you suggest for mitigating ageism? That's a great question. Any of you want to tackle that?
I would say, I mean, really, when a resume comes in, I'm looking at that person's experience, whether it's experience in the workplace or it's experience that they may have had through life, anything like that. I would say that at my position and the company that I work at specifically, our age range is more on the higher end. So we get a little bit of everybody in, but in order to mitigate that, really just talking with every candidate and seeing what they have to offer, whether it's somebody who's had years of experience or been in the workforce for years, or it's somebody right out, really just looking for the best fit there, but then also as an applicant, really selling what you can bring to the company, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your age is. If you can deliver to the company what we're looking for, you're going to be the best fit for the position. And that might not always be true in every hiring situation out there. We know it happens, but really highlighting what you can bring, and that it doesn't matter what your age is, as long as you can complete the tasks that are necessary and meet whatever, if there are physical requirements for the job out there.
On a related note, is there something on their resume? Is there a good way to handle years so that age is not so obvious? Is there something that you all would suggest?
You never need to put your year of graduation. You never need to put, so if you've been in the workforce for a while, you probably have several jobs. Put the most recent and most current job. So I got to a point, I'm not young, I got to a point where I knocked off the first couple jobs because they were entry level, right? They were very early in my career and it was making the resume too long, too packed. I never ever, and this was from outplacement services as well, never ever put years of degrees because assumptions will be made about age. I think the best way to combat it, once you've tailored your resume appropriately like that, is also, and Samantha was saying this, focus on your experience. There's probably not a question they're going to ask that you haven't actually done in some way. So do that preparation and really focus on your experience. I happen to know for the job I'm in now, the other candidates that were before me and being looked at were 10 to 15 years younger than I. And I was not the first choice until I had the interview. And every question they ask, I could say, yes, actually, I did do that a couple of times. Let me tell you about this time. And that goes a long way for the hiring leaders to gain confidence in your abilities.
Great. Uh, there's a question about what would your recommendations be? Um, sorry, I'm scrolling through this. Um, be for students who have had interviews for multiple jobs and maybe waiting for on a decision for their first choice, their employer that I want this, but they've had an offer from maybe the third or fourth choice, their preference. What's your suggestion or recommendation on them?
If I can jump in on that one, I would say be very transparent as a candidate. I would let that maybe third or fourth top job that you're looking at know that, hey, you know what? I have interviewed with other people. I'm waiting to hear from them. But then on the flip side, I would reach out to that maybe job that's your number one and let them know, hey, you know what? I have gotten a job offer, but I am very interested in you. And just kind of let them know. That gives some polite pressure for them to maybe jump on that offer and get it going maybe sooner than later.
Okay. Another question are, what are the tips you give people that want to get out of your degreed profession? So I guess maybe someone's maybe transitioning, if I'm interpreting that right, and Avis, if I'm not asking that right. So if your tips, if people, they want to get out of the profession they're in.
Yeah, my background is I have a background in law and I've wanted to get out of it for years. It's been like 9 years now. And as of March, I decided to step out early on, trying to get a job outside of the legal field. Majority of the time, employers would tell me, you should stick with law and try and stay in the field. So just some suggestions on recommendations for people that are trying to get out of their years of job history and their educational background.
I would suggest that you hone in on those transferable skills. If you've been in the legal world, you've got analytical skills, you've got writing skills, you've got just lots of different, I think about critical thinking and analysis. That's got to be really strong for you. So focus your examples on that. When they say, tell me about a time when, come up with an example that may be out of the legal world, but absolutely transfers to what they're looking for. Some of it is their paradigm and some of it is our paradigm when we're job searching. And I've been there as well. I started applying for events management jobs because a lot of what I've done in my past is coordinating events. They might've been learning events, but they were events. So think about what your transferable skills are and then how do you exemplify those? What are your past examples, your stars that you can put together?
I would say too, if you can get any experience in the new field that you want to go into. I mean, for example, let's just pretend, I want to be a yoga teacher now. That's my new thing. Find a mentor who's a yoga teacher. Start going to classes, start learning about it, start reading about it. I mean, there's so much on the internet now in 2020. You could watch YouTubes for days on the field that you're interested in, try to pick up a couple classes maybe on it. I think that would really help you try to get that experience as well that you could talk about in an interview.
Yeah, and just one more thing quick on that, kind of what Lisa-Ann was saying. A lot of organizations look for people that have eyes and opinions and maybe background outside of their organization, because you're a new set of eyes that come in. Just with any new hire, you don't know how things are run. You maybe don't have that experience in that industry, but that can be a huge asset to you that nobody else can bring. If I've worked for years in the automotive industry and suddenly I want to go into manufacturing of fashion or apparel, something like that, I can bring a different perspective that nobody else is going to have. And especially in companies that are going through a culture change or trying to adjust how they run, that can be a huge asset. So you really can promote yourself as that when moving into a different industry.
Yeah, so there was a comment too, kind of reinforcing what Allie said. There's opportunities to get badges or certifications through courses or those webinars or online elements there. So it's certainly something there. And I would imagine it goes back to Allie, your comment too about using your cover letter to highlight things that may not appear on your resume, right?
Absolutely.
thinking, as I heard you say earlier.
Yep. And I think too, it's important. I mean, life is long. If you're stuck in a job that you don't think is the right fit for you or it doesn't bring you joy, get out of there. Life is too short for that. There's so many avenues to discover. And, I think definitely if law's not your thing, find your thing. And once you do, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I wish I was doing this forever. You'll know.
So there was a question about, is it appropriate to reach out to a company with your resume if there is no job posting?
Definitely. I would say yes. And I actually get that from time to time. People will message me or, mail me their resume. Hey, I'm just moving into this area, looking for a job. Here are my skills. Definitely. It just like, Samantha was talking about, when those people contact you directly, they kind of move up to the top of the pile just because of that name recognition. They took the time to reach out. So definitely, if there's a company you're interested in, email them your resume.
Okay, so there's a kind of a scenario here that I'll read. It says, in the past, I've seen people get ahead in terms of level of position. For example, I have a friend who is in their mid-20s and have gotten an art director position for a company. How are ways to get a position like that, or is it based on the person's situation? So are you basically maybe moving up more quickly, or again, identifying positions that maybe you don't have all of the base positions, or what we would think of as base positions before applying? Are there strategies or thoughts about that?
Yeah, I can attest to that because I'm an example of that. I had years and years of being a manager title, even though it was a global role running a function. The companies were very flat and frankly very stingy with titles. So I was at a manager level doing what in other companies would be director, executive director level work. So it took a long time for me to break through that. And what I will tell you is I continued to apply for jobs that didn't have that title. I got to a point where I stopped applying for manager roles and only applied for director and above. The search criteria, the automated search criteria that's used now by companies often would screen me out early. So then I'd go back if it was something I was attracted to and try to get in touch with a human body in the HR department and talk about it. And a few times that got me to the interview phase. And in a couple of cases got me an offer. This job that I have now actually was through a headhunter, through a third-party recruiter, executive recruiter. And oh, well, they're going to go a different direction. That's when I found out later that, my team told me there were these other candidates they were considering. And then it opened up and was posted publicly by the company, not through the headhunter. So I applied to the company directly. Within 2 days, I had an interview scheduled the next week. And then the story progressed. So I would say don't give up. Try to get the titles earlier in your career so you don't get locked out by those automated search engines, right? Those automated systems that do keyword searches. But don't give up. Keep at it. And it doesn't always happen early. Very often, if it does, it's either a referral or it's someone who is maybe in a smaller organization. Like you can go work for rehab facilities and be a director of whatever, and it's really not the same as being a global director in a corporation, but you get the experience and you get the title. So it might be the organizations and the industry you're looking at, or it might be just that you need to stay the course. Don't give up.
Yeah, and just to kind of maybe go along with that and maybe a little bit of a different direction, every company, the way that they structure their organizational structure, things are going to be labeled differently. I would say just even in human resources, the different levels that you have of, you could be a specialist, or you could be a generalist, or you could be a manager, or you could be a director, things like that. If I took what I'm at here and I went over here, I might drop down a level or I might jump up a level. So kind of keep that in mind, that really looking at, okay, well, what is that position telling me I'm going to be responsible for? Yeah, it may be a title change, but you may be taking on additional responsibility, or maybe it is less responsibility. You really just kind of need to dig into that a little bit more. And I'm sure we all know people who have done this. we're all greater on the internet or greater on paper. I can put whatever I want on my LinkedIn, and unless somebody digs into that, you never know. I could be the president of my company. And unless you went and looked on my page, or looked on my company's webpage, you might not realize that. So I know sometimes it can be hard to see other people being like, man, they are really flying through in their job. But just kind of keep that in the back of your mind, that positions and titles may be different throughout different places. And it's like the actual work that you're doing is really what matters at the end of the day. And if you're happy with your job, your contributions, and your compensation, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ties back to Lisa and the points you were making. If as you look at your skill set and you're going to have to go into an interview, can you talk about those things that they're asking for and those experiences? If you literally have that, if you've been doing that work, maybe the title doesn't reflect it, but you've been doing the work, you're going to be able to do that. On the flip side of that, be realistic with yourself. And just, I have to say, been an example where we just did a search for a vice president position here at the college. And we had some candidates who had 1 year out of undergrad and had one, and they applied for a vice president's position, right? That's not likely going to be the case. So, be realistic when you're thinking about some things too. Any other questions from folks at this point? Some great questions coming in, great answers, supportive guidance here.
Hey, Bill, I just had another thought to share. In all of the interviewing I've done and all the interviewing I've been a candidate in, if it's a really difficult process that you're going through and you walk away going, oh, that didn't feel well, that didn't work for me, it was a struggle to get through every step, and you're looking at a job offer, be very cautious. Think about if you're in the selection process, that's a data point for you in the decision-making process. How are you going to be happy following that? If they're showing you their best and it's not good for you, then later when things are more relaxed and you're just one of the many, what's that going to mean? So really look, I can tell you the best jobs I had happened all very easily. The process just flowed and everything was right. It was like a good dating experience and a bad dating experience. Get the job with the good dating experience, not the bad dating experience. That's the best analogy I can give.
Great. Well, I just want to give a final thank you to all three of you, Allie, Samantha, Lisa Ann. Thank you so much for sharing your professional insights and experience. I know that this is a challenging time for a number of folks who either are searching for that first job or maybe are finding themselves doing a mid-career switch when they didn't think they were going to. So this is really helpful and useful. Just wanted to say thank you again for taking the time to do this.